we see more and more enzymes hitting the market and more enzymes being utilized by brewers. I know many of them are being marketed as a way of making a greener beer from an energy standpoint, but they also market quality benefits as well. I'm curious about some of the effects of some of those things on yeast. You know, you have ALDC out there, you have Brewer's Clarex, you have a wide range of saccharification type enzymes. How does that stuff play into or affect the yeast strains that we're using?
I mean, the enzymes are, by their nature, typically pretty purified products. So you usually can't expect any like negative side effects. There's certain things that will interact between yeast and an enzyme if you're using one. I think enzymes totally have their place. Just totally depends on your beer philosophy and what you're trying to accomplish. Like, especially in the larger production breweries, there's a lot of benefits there. There are some cases where I suppose it would have an impact on yeast. Like if you're using a amyloglucosidase to make a beer that'll ferment down to nothing, you're releasing a lot of glucose, so you're going to change the ester production. You'll make more esters in the yeast. So if you want a neutral beer, then like an amyloglucosidase is going to be a challenge if you're using it in the cold side or on the hot side for that matter. ALDC is ALDC. It works great. It's cheap. It's going to get cheaper. Pretty good solution if you're worried about diacetyl.
From a brewer standpoint, do you feel as if using ALDC is cheating?
No, I don't. I'm sure there's some that do. I do think that there's a lot of scenarios where it's simply not necessary. Like it's totally simple to make lager beers and haze and IPAs. I would say those are the two most like diacetyl risky beers. Totally possible to make those without having to worry about ALDC, but like brewers often are really, really worried that someone's going to taste those flavors in their beers. So, ALDC is a simple solution to eliminate that risk.
Yeah, it is. And I know there's also strains being marketed right now that genetically will produce that as well. But it is my understanding that at least with some of those strains that they will lose the ability to do that over multiple generations. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, we don't make any ALDC producing strains. I don't have much experience myself, even with producing what are called transgenic yeasts, where you're plugging a gene in from another species or organism into the yeast, which is the case for ALDC. It's a gene from lactobacillus that's being plugged into the yeast. What often happens with transgenics is that because it is a different gene that isn't normally in that organism, it might not be stable. The yeast might decide, well, why the hell do I have this enzyme? I don't need this. And, pick it out. The gene editing technologies keep getting better and easier, but that is still a risk. And like from our end, just talking, circling back on trying to have a different perspective on strain development, we're working on some ways to reduce diacetyl formation in yeast strains without having to introduce genes from other organisms. It still means using gene editing technology or genetic modification, but kind of playing around with the opposite thought process of like, what can we take away to solve this problem rather than what can we add?